Padar and Dandachita, that's good. Hello everybody, that's very good to see you all. Thanks, Shamati, good to see you. Vadri. Yes, Gabriel, hello everybody. You're all zooming in. Good to see you. Really good to see you. So I hope you're getting on well on this retreat as we're going on. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope you're managing to find a way of being on retreat in your home. It's not easy, is it? Because there are always all these other pulls on you, and you have to use your willpower more to be on retreat. Whereas when you go on a residential retreat, what the conditions do is mean that you don't need to use your willpower so much. So it is very different, isn't it? So hope you're managing all right. Hope you're managing to have naps and have a nice breakfast. Sanjay's been making me porridge every morning, so that's good. He's practicing self-surrender. I think he's got a bit way to go, but yeah, it's a good start. Yeah, it's a good start. Yeah, so welcome Australia. Is New Zealand here yet? Belgium's here. Oh yeah, New Zealand's here, that's good. You should all have little flags. Scotland here. Very nice indeed. Okay, I'm going to actually remember to salute the shrine this morning. So let's start by saluting the shrine in the time-honored way. Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Dhammaya.
Namo Dhammaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Namo.
Namo Namo.
Om.
Om.
Okay, good. Good. So today we're moving on to the Anatta Reflection. We are doing a bit of a whistle-stop tour of this, aren't we? Just when you dip your toe into reflecting on Dukkha, we're then whizzing on to Anatta. So it is a bit, a bit of a tour through these quite quickly. But I hope you're getting something from it. Hope you're getting sense of possibility of meditating more on the lakshanas. Yeah. So I was remembering a while ago, can't remember how long ago. I think a few of us from the community, I think Yanavancha, we all went to Florence to spend a week looking at the paintings. I'd recommend it. It's a wonderful thing to do. We spent a good day in the monastery of San Marco looking at all the Fra Angelicos, all the cells with different Fra Angelicos, and this wonderful Annunciation at the top of the stairs. But to my surprise, I found myself very attracted to the crucifixions. I never felt that before. I've always felt it was a disgusting image. Picture of somebody being tortured as your primary image is a horrifying thought in a way. But in Fra Angelico's hands, the crucifixions are exquisite. They're older, so that it's not Christ in agony. It's this kind of blessed I thought, letting go of everything. I remember that there was one particular, I think it's the crucifixion of St. Peter. He's upside down, isn't it? That's right. Which is one of the saints that's upside down, I think it's St. Peter. But the face of St. Peter in this crucifixion was sort of beatific and really, really beautiful. And when I came back, I went and met Bhante, and I was talking to him about the Fra Angelicos. And I was, as you do sometimes with Bhante, you sort of tentatively suggest something. Foolish creature that I was. I was saying, I started to feel that you could use, after all, in certain hands, in Fra Angelico's hands anyway, you could use the crucifixion as an image of spiritual death, because of letting go, sacrificing the self. I said, I thought, at least in that, from Fra Angelico's sense, you could use it as an image of spiritual death. And Bhante looked at me and said, no, no. He said, in Buddhism, you're trying to see through the self. You're not trying to sacrifice the self. I thought it was exquisitely put that there isn't a self that you're trying to slough off or let go of or sacrifice, however beatifically. You're trying to see the fact that you've never had one. You're trying to see through it. So all of our myths are effectively myths of seeing through the self. So you can either see through the self by making yourself more and more refined, so that your self becomes like a glass to see reality, or I don't know, I can extend the metaphor, you let the self be seen through by the Ishvara Devata. They're seeing through you into you. But you're always trying to see through self. You're not trying to get rid of it. There isn't something you've got that you need to get rid of. So any reflection on Anatta, any reflection on the Lakshanas, you're always trying to see through self. Burbia puts it rather more technically. He talks about you're always trying to lessen the fabrication of self. That self is something that you've put together, you've fabricated, you've confected. You've identified with the elements of self, and that identification is clinging. So you're always trying to see through always trying to lessen the fabrication of self, is how he puts it. Or more simply, you're just trying to see through the self, see that there isn't a thing called the self. And of course, all genuinely spiritual practices are doing this, even if you don't particularly have that intention. So you see that the Maitreyabandhu practice is doing the same thing from the opposite pole, that you extend yourself to include eventually all beings. So where is yourself left once you've included all beings? That you extend yourself. Interestingly, Ratnaguna was saying that sometimes the Buddha taught non-self and sometimes he didn't, depending what he was trying to do. So if he taught metta, you can't teach metta on the basis of non-self. It's to do with expanding yourself so that self is seen through and identified with all beings. It's a perfectly legitimate prajna practice from that point of view. If you're very mindful, to the degree you're mindful, there's a kind of seeing through of the self. You feel less fabricated, don't you? Less bitty. When you're very mindful, you feel that glorious. The trouble with this word mindfulness, it's trotted out so easily now. But when you do come out of meditation, you do feel mindful. You feel like you flow more easily with life, don't you? You feel that self doesn't get in the way so much, that your sense of self is less jagged and constructed and kind of clumsy and clunky. You feel like you sort of flow more. Samadhi practice itself thins the self, doesn't it? Self is no longer this congealed lump of you, but something much more diaphanous and and softened and so on. So all genuinely Buddhist practice is lessening the fabrication of self, or seeing through self. Every time you're generous, you lessen the fabrication of self. Every time you confess, every time you apologize, you lessen the fabrication of self, to use that language. So what you're lessening the, when you're generous, when you confess, you're lessening your identification with yourself, aren't you? And what you are, and what you want, and what you're like. Every time you apologize, you lessen the identification with self. Every time you confess, every time you forgive. I've been feeling that our modern culture is becoming so unforgiving, unforgiving of the past, particularly, and how people acted in the past, or how we like to think they acted in the past. Unforgiving of all sorts of people. I think if we're in danger of becoming a righteous and unforgiving society, which seems so terrible to me. But every time you forgive, you lessen your identification with yourself. So the Anatta Reflection is another way of doing that. It's not some specialized bit of kit that you need exquisite training in. It's another way of lessening the fabrication of self. It's a really good way, just as forgiveness is a really good way. If we could really forgive, gosh, we'd be quite something. You always have to die, don't you, to forgive? So yes, the Anatta Reflection is another way of lessening the fabrication of self, seeing through self. And well, how I was practicing it this morning, you just take up the view. You remind yourself that it's dukkha to identify with anything. I think this is a broad principle, isn't it? There's a period in life where identification is psychologically helpful. So, for instance, one of the things that it was very difficult for me was coming out as gay. I'm not gay anymore. I've resigned. But there was a period in my life when I really needed to assert my identity as being gay and not being straight, and blah, 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 and had to keep telling people about it. So I'm still doing it now. Get over it. There was a value at a certain time of identifying that and being with other people who identify with all sort of important for a while. I think it's important was for me until you're about 25. After that, it gets more and more daft. Anyway, but there's a phase in anyone's life where identification with identity, for instance, is valid, but any identification with eventually with things like gender, race, sexuality, etc., they all have to be let go. They're all a kind of clinging, and clinging causes suffering. So what we're trying to do that in our broad spiritual life, let go of more and more identification. And what we're doing in this meditation is trying to do that in a little bit more meditative, in a sort of forensic way, if you know what I mean. But it's the same thing. You're letting go of identification, because identity itself is suffering. It's a constriction, and the human creature doesn't want to be. We're like the oak trees in the garden here. We want to be able to completely open up. There's these wonderful oak trees here, and they've got space to be fully oak tree. We human beings want to have space to be fully whatever we are. This mysterious, you can't even say human, this mysterious thing that we are. We want to be fully that. And any time that we identify, every time we get stuck in identity, whatever that is, at more and more subtle levels, we constrict that. So in this meditation, you're trying to take that deeper and deeper, letting go of identity, letting go of any sense of me and mine. That this is me, this is mine. you see how it's a natural subtilization, that's a word, of a much larger process that spiritual life is engaged in. And I don't think it's worth doing the subtle version if you're not doing the, as it were, cruder version. Otherwise, it's like doing the finishing touches on a painting before you've got the structure right. So how I've been practicing it, and I've been using it quite a lot, as my approach to Shunyata, because that's the royal road to Shunyata, and then opening up to Padmasambhava. I found just bringing to mind the blue sky actually unhelpful. Again, I was taking the metaphor literally. Now, the blue sky is an image for Shunyata, which is another way of talking about nothing is me or mine. So, you take up that view that there's no things, there's no me or mine. I need to try and see through that. So the simplest way to start is to start with the phenomena that's easiest to disidentify with. Yeah. So that would be a simple approach to the Anatta Reflection. So you first of all, again, you take up the view, just like I put on these glasses. This time you take up the view of Anatta, that there is no me, there's no self, nothing's mine, it doesn't belong to me, I don't own anything. I mean, in the 6 element practice, you see that we do this par excellence. When I was doing it at Gukuloka, I had the strong sense that the body is like, when you lend a book from somebody and it becomes yours, but you, in the background, that I never did buy that book, I lent that from someone. Oh, borrowed. Sorry, I always get that mixed up. You think I'd be good at words. Borrowed, that's the word. Like a book you borrow, and it becomes yours on your bookshelf. But you have a vague sight memory that it isn't yours, you borrowed it. And that's what you're doing in the 6 element practice, isn't it? Is you're remembering that all the elements that you've really made yours, they were borrowed from the elements outside of you. And they will have to be returned. Just like your library book, as it were, will need to be returned at some point. You need to realize it's just borrowed. But in this approach, you're just remembering, okay, the body form doesn't belong to me. So, really start with body sensation and see if you can just remember it's not me, it's not mine. You're not your knee, you're not your foot. They don't belong to you. It's interesting that you can have some control on them, but very, very limited. They don't belong to you. You don't own them. So you try to disidentify with them. If you find it helpful, you might just say, not me, not mine, if that's helpful. And you do that with a very light touch. When I was doing it this morning, the main thing is that you're really trying to be receptive to what you're experiencing, and really just saying that they're just experiencing. So another way is just saying, well, this is sensation, that's sensation. You can even, if you're terribly subtle, think this is a moment of knowing sensation, or eventually this is just a moment of awareness. That's not mine either. But start very straightforwardly, I would suggest, that's what I do. Start with body sensations, because they're the easiest to disidentify with. Then you might deepen that into Vedana, a sense of Vedana. So, I particularly explore it today with exploring that me Vedana. Here I am. This morning it felt like, when you go into a teenager's room and it sort of smells of teenager and teenagerness, and the room is if you close your eyes, it's like me-ness, like an atmosphere, I find. That's how I anyway. It's that sort of habitual, messy bedroom of oneself. And you try to feel the Vedana of that, of being you meditating, and letting go of that feeling any uncomfortable Vedana, remembering that's not me, that's not mine. And you can do that Then you can broaden out if you wanted to sounds. Then clearly not you, and they're not me, they're not mine. They don't belong to you, do they? Sounds. Sangaji, who's here camping in the field, he was saying, talking about the wood pigeon, that dreadful repetitive call, and wanting to throw a stick at it. But you can sort of attach to sound, so that they're not me, not mine. So you work in that sort of way, and again, try to move between local and global. So look at particular sensations and see if you can disidentify with them. Say, certain body sensations. I find it again helpful for things like physical discomfort. Tune into a physical discomfort. See if you can just let go of all that gripping and holding onto it and identifying with it and worrying about it and so on. And then broaden out to your whole body, your whole body sensation, broaden out to sound. With all these reflections, the principle is you're trying to be as global as possible. You're trying to see that you really don't own anything. You don't own the sounds, you don't own the physical sensations, you don't own Vedana. Try to sort of more and more just think this is a moment of awareness that I'm experiencing. And then that's not mine either. If you're one time I managed this in a meditation very strongly, which is see if you can notice that the sense of time is attached to, that you feel that I'm in this time. Time is like, it's like we've got this grappling hook, I think, that's latched onto the future, and we're always drawing through it. So on this retreat, you'll always have a sense of how far you are along that rope, and the grappling hook's at the end of the retreat, or sometimes the grappling hook is on lunch, isn't it? It's as simple as that, and you're just you're gradually getting closer and closer to lunch and further away from breakfast. But the time sense is something we grasp onto. It's something we identify with. So you can see if you're sort of grasping on, holding on to, identifying with, oh, this is going on for so long, and see if you can disidentify with that. Yeah? So you just basically, the principle is go from the cruder, easier, straightforward things like body sensation, and try to find more and more subtle ways of remembering that this is not me, this is not mine. Even the intention to pay attention moment to moment, that's not mine either. The very act of regarding things as not self is not mine either. It's like Russian dolls, you can get more and more subtle. Even this idea that here's me meditating on trying to experience non-self, that's not mine either. Don't be clever cloggy about it. You're just trying to keep on disidentifying with the fabrications of self. You're trying to see that there are all these different fabrications. You're just trying to disidentify, it's like you have to keep on slipping out back of them. Something, you feel something, or you think something, or you remember something, and you think, oh, that's me doing, I'm grasping onto that. I'm identifying with that memory or that thought or that feeling. So you just slip out from that, and you think, oh, I'm slipping out from that. I need to remember that that's not self either. And you keep on sort of, exiting stage back. You keep on trying to let it all go. Disidentify. The other the things to look out for, two things to look out for again, is keep noticing if you're mistaking seeing through for sacrificing or getting rid of. The intention to disidentify can become, again, secretly disguised, a disguised way of pushing things away, of actually not wanting experience, of you think you're disidentifying, but really what you're doing is subtle aversion. Yeah? So again, look out for if you're trying to get rid of things, if you're trying to get rid of the self, look out for that. Again, Burbia talks about what he calls a kink in the carpet, where, you know, when you can never quite get a carpet flat and a bit sticks up and you push that down, it pops up somebody else. Actually, it's more true of a rug, but there you go. It's like that. You can, if you're not careful, you try and chase around yourself. Okay, body sensations, they're not mine. Oh, but now I'm thinking, so that's not mine. You sort of chase around yourself like a dog chasing its tail. So that's just a species of literalism. You're just trying to relaxedly keep on just reminding yourself in a very light way, whilst being really, really receptive to your experience, locally, globally, including painful experience, neutral experience, pleasant experience, being as broad as you can, inclusive as you can, and just keep lightly remembering, just keep lightly, non-ponderously, poetically, as it were, just remembering that's not mine. I can let that's not me. That's not mine. Really, really keep it really, really simple, I would say. And if you find that south seems to go there and it reappears here, it's usually to do with the fact you're trying to get rid of it, and that's what you're getting into. So see if you can sort of remember that. Okay, I don't think I need to say anything more about that. Yeah. So should we have just a minute or two just to stretch our legs if you want to, and then we'll do a longer meditation. And I'll read a poem at the beginning and at the end. So when you're ready, setting yourself up in meditation. So lovely that we can do this together across the world like this. Incredible. And when you're ready, closing your eyes. So in this Anatta Reflection, we're not doing something especially technical and difficult that's different from what we've been doing. We're trying to work a little bit more subtly at seeing that things are not me, are not mine. But first of all, closing your eyes. And once again, see if you can soften your eyes, soften your brow. Just experiencing that relief of not looking into the Zoom anymore. See if you can release your jaw, your mouth. Letting go of your shoulders. Again, having this sense of your whole system calming down, quietening down. And see if you can soften your belly. And then see if you can tell if you're gripping with your thighs. We're very often doing that without realizing it. On the road home, it was when I said, "There is no such thing as the truth," that the grapes seemed fatter. The fox ran out of his hole. You said, "There are many truths, but they are not parts of a truth." Then the tree at night began to change. smoking through green and smoking blue. We were two figures in a wood. We said we stood alone. It was when I said, words are not forms of a single word. In the sum of the parts, there are only the parts. The world must be measured by I. It was when you said, the idols have seen lots of poverty, snakes and gold and lice, but not the truth. It was at that time that the silence was largest and longest. The night was roundest. The fragrance of the autumn warmest, closest, and strongest. Taking up the Anatta Reflection. And for the last 5 minutes or so, just sit, let go of any effort. On the road home, it was when I said, "There is no such thing as the truth," that the grapes seemed fatter, the fox ran out of his hole. You said, "There are many truths, but they are not parts of a truth." And the tree at night began to change, smoking through green and smoking blue. We were two figures in a wood. We said we stood alone. It was when I said, "Words are not forms of a single word. In the sum of the parts, there are only the parts. The world must be measured by the eye." It was when you said, "The idols have seen lots of poverty, snakes and gold and lice. but not the truth. It was at that time that the silence was largest and longest, the night was roundest, the fragrance of the autumn warmest, closest and strongest. Okay, good. We'll have a 10-minute break, and then Yonavatra and I will see if there's any questions we can answer, and then we'll finish the morning again with just sitting. Okay, so let's just have a break now. Okay, so let's come back. Oh, tea break. Oh, next stretch.
Jesus.
I'm liking your shirt, Amadonna. Good to go a bit Hawaiian. So it's the weather for it is still glorious here at Ishan. That's fairly glorious from there as well, though it seems to be dark in Melbourne, so it must be night. Obviously, to the other side of the planet. So I thought we'd start this series of questions. Just be quite good to just hear from a few of you, perhaps particularly those who haven't said much yet, just briefly about how you're getting on with these reflections, just to sort of, for us to have a bit of a sense of how you're getting on with these reflections, just perhaps particularly anyone who hasn't said anything yet, just to make sure that everyone's involved and then we get to hear from you. Why didn't you start, Dad Tutor? How have you been getting on with the reflections? Yeah, she's frozen. See if you can unmute yourself, Dad Tutor, and tell us how you've been getting on with the reflections.
Thanks, Maitreyabandhu. I'm just want to express appreciation. I'm so appreciating being able to participate and be with you both and everyone else on retreat. I think this is night 3 of very little sleep, but I just really want to be here. I think I've got this not a formed question, but when you kind of looking at trying to see through a fixed sense of self, I find it much more complex as soon as I tune into the heart area. Like, so for instance, when you read that poem and there's a response, and then it's just very difficult to not posit someone having that response when it's something that opens the heart in a really strong way. So intellectually, I can do all the things, oh, it's not fixed and so on, but that actually doesn't change this, like, and if I'm enjoying, therefore there's an enjoyer. When I'm focusing around the heart area, or if I'm deeply moved, that there is an I there. And I just wonder if you could speak to that a little bit about how to loosen it in meditation.
Thanks.
Well, the first thing to say is, I guess, that it's a good thing. It's a good thing that the heart's moved. I think if we step through this doorway of prajna into whatever lies the other side of that doorway, the vast, spacious realm of spiritual rebirth, of shunyata, the heart will be moved. That will really include metta and devotion and shraddha. So in a sense, I think if you're moved, it's already an expansive emotion. It's heading in the direction of shunyata, I think. Bhante says in Wisdom Beyond Words that metta is prajna and prajna is metta. And I think from what I sort of am getting from your question is that then it's easy to have a subtle holding on or subtle identification with the very expansive emotion. And what I do is I again, just noticing it, just try and you could, this I think I kind of just do a sort of not me, not mine. But somewhere outside of meditation, I'm also, I like to reflect on the skandhas. So outside of meditation, I've sometimes done some work on knowing this is feeling, this is sanskara, volition. And emotion is a sort of, tends to be a mixture, doesn't it, of Vedana and sanskara and vijnana. So outside of meditation, I'm also trying to disidentify in that way. And sometimes within meditation, sometimes I say, okay, well, this is pleasant feeling, not me, not mine. This is a sort of expansive, metaphor, emotion, sanskara, volition, I mean, but not me, not mine. You can disidentify from, you can still have metta, but not have it be my metta. It's just a field of love, of metta, without somebody generating it or owning it, and without any object. You can disidentify. Vasantra teaches this. You disidentify from the subject, from the object, and from even the very notion of metta at a conceptual level. And then all you've got is this expansive awareness, which will be love, but it'll be without an owner. Does that help? I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, don't you? What I was thinking, I don't know whether you've had this, but I was quite resistant to these kind of practices because I thought it would be letting go of the human in some way. That disidentifying somehow was always cold, that it was always a letting go of the human, that seeing through self was like, well, I'll become like a computer. So somewhere I had that background sense that it was letting go of the human, that it wasn't creating more,
right,
but it was a kind of vacuum that I was backing out into. And for me, so I was quite resistant to these approaches because of that. I actually wanted beauty and wanted to feel moved by things. I didn't want to disidentify with that if it meant, a kind of stepping out of the human, if you see what I mean. I know the human can be awfully painful and a mess, but it also can be beautiful and moving and valuable. And I didn't want to disidentify with that. So I think there's something in how it's the words and so on that makes it feel like you're kind of stepping away from the human in some way, and letting humanity sort of be like a husk that you leave, rather than opening out to more. I think that's, for me, that's been in the background of my feelings about all insight practices. I could see the value of them cognitively. I thought they were the right thing to do. And yes, clearly that was a goal of Buddhist practice. But I didn't want to lose the human, if you see what I mean. I think that was, for me, was the back of that sort of question.
And you don't, of course.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah.
You don't lose the human.
But I think that can be the fear.
Yeah, which is a fear in a way that's, I think, based in a very subtle nihilism.
Yes, that's right.
Isn't it? That there'll be a nothing if there isn't, if I let go of the identification. But actually what opens up is more richness, more love. And just to follow on from that, I think that particularly in the West, and maybe even in our order, and insight can become very associated with the cognitive dimension. And prajna, insight seems to be a word that seems to connote a cognitive. And of course there is a cognitive dimension, there is a knowing. But equally, one could talk in terms of metta and shraddha as insight, as prajna.
Yeah, thank you.
So Anna Vaja has raised her virtual hand.
Oh yes, okay, go on. Where are you?
Where are you?
Hello, I'm here just outside the shrine room. in the Pranya courtyard.
How are you doing that? That's clever.
It's a great place to be by Pranya. Just had to turn away from it because the sun's too hot. But I just wanted to say that well, thank you anyway to start with. Is just yeah, so this morning I've in the reflection, I think is the first reflection I've kind of connected to more deeply, and so I was just having this real sense of freedom, but also of a deep pain at the same time. And I was just, oh, my heart's opened. It's taken since Friday for my heart to open. Because I think I was back at Akashavana and on my ordination retreat, and that month where we practiced the 6 elements was just, it's stayed with me, and maybe, yeah, that's just perhaps my way in. But what I'm slightly, I might be answering my own question here, but what I'm confused about is that when it comes to reflecting on impermanence, completely different ball game. I find it really unbearable, and I'm not sure if this is in some way that, you know, whenever I come on retreat, there's always my parents always come to mind. They're in their mid-80s, and you know, there's a sense of watching their frailty now, and that always comes. So there's always kind of pain around that. I guess maybe I block off to it. And in that sense, there's that sense of dukkha around that. But it kind of feels like, I'm not sure if I'm making any sense, but there's this massive disparity from how I respond to one practice and to the other. I'm not sure if you've got any wise words for me to help with this, because this is just a real thing that goes on with me all the time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in a way you have answered your own question in that, I guess feelings of, if feelings of grief or poignancy or sadness or I guess anxiety come up when we reflect on impermanence. In a sense, I think that that's sort of all right if you can hold, if you can turn towards them with tenderness. It'll be all right to feel them. It'll be okay in the impermanence reflection. Prakasha says, certainly he said on the retreat I was on, that all our feelings want to be felt, and they can't hurt us. The stories that we tell ourselves do hurt us and can reinforce negativity. But the feelings themselves, pain, loss, grief, even fear, it's okay to allow to be felt if we can feel them in an embodied way, and if we can turn towards them with tenderness and hold them with courage, I guess, and tenderness. So if impermanence is bringing up those reflections, that could be a way of working. If, on the other hand, you're not able to do that and you just feel a sense of tightening, you said it was unbearable, then I'd back off. I think with all these reflections, you don't want to push. They require a really gentle touch. If the heart closes down because of some sort of tightening, then I think the reflection won't go in, it won't go deep. So I think it is okay to sometimes, well, not just sometimes, it is okay to back off and say, okay, well, I'll do some more samadhi practice, or turn to another lakshana. Or, for example, if grief comes up when you reflect on impermanence, well, then you've got the dukkha lakshana to look at, and you could see where is the clinging. and see if I can soften the clinging. Because actually all the Lakshanas are they're not really separate. But the approaches are, and personally, I don't particularly focus on the impermanence Lakshana very much. I mean, I do the dukkha one and the anatta one. And I think that's okay too, to not do all three. Rob Berbier says do 2 out of the 3.
At least 2.
At least 2 out of the 3. He says that each one can have its limitations. Do 2 out of the 3 if you can't do all 3. But he particularly, I think, emphasizes the anatta one, and is a bit wary of the impermanence one in the sense of it can lead to a tightening, which I think Vimosha Raja was talking about the other day. And you don't want to do that. So the dukkha and the anatta ones tend to lead to a softening.
He talks somewhere about criticizing the idea of the dark night of the soul, doesn't he? About
He does, yeah.
I can't quite remember. Can you remember what he says? It's about focusing on anicca and over focusing on that.
I think that's a different
Right.
point with the dark night. He's sort of talking about that we will conform to ideas.
Oh, yeah.
He's wary of models that say things like after an insight, after a breakthrough, there must be some sort of dark night. He's sort of saying, look, because reality is shunya, and how we look at it, it'll look back at us in that way. So if you go looking for a dark night, expecting one, then presto, what will you find? But if you just
it's very dark in Melbourne.
if you assume it'll just be metta and shraddha that you open up to, that's more likely to happen.
Yeah, that's it.
I know Bodhiketa has a question.
Right,
as well.
thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Vadri, and then Bodhiketa.
Yeah, it's Prasada Vadri. Last year in Colchester, we did a kind of like study around the book "The Dark Side of the Moon," and it's basically on the Genjo Koan, and basically in there it said sarva sanskaras anitya, sarva samskara dukkha, but sarva dharma anatta. And I was just wondering that kind of completely opened up the kind of way how I saw reality, and it kind of was freeing. And I was wondering, is that something somewhere else found, and is that actually how the Lakshanas are described? Because I'd never actually seen it like that.
Yes, they are described like that. The Buddha talked about them in that way. So all conditioned things are impermanent, and all conditioned things are unsatisfactory, they're dukkha, but all things whatsoever are anatta. So the unconditioned, or whatever opens up, absolute reality, spiritual rebirth, bodhicitta, that's all anatta as well. Mm-hmm. So anatta applies to all phenomena, conditioned and unconditioned.
Okay, that really clarified it, because I always thought that the Lakshanas were all conditioned things are the 3 things. And I never realized that anatta is actually all dharmas are.
All dharmas are empty of
self,
self-nature.
Yeah, self-nature.
Doesn't Bhante go into that into the survey, I think.
Does he?
I think so.
Which also means that we stop. Well, it's a guard against reification of, I don't know, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the enlightened mind, absolute reality, absolute bodhicitta. If we remember that too is empty of any self-nature, then it guards us against eternalism.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for. I'm really finding this very helpful.
Good. Bodhiketa had a question. Did you have one about Vacha?
I think
Yeah.
was sufficiently answered.
Yeah, dedicated. Abhayavacha?
Yes, thank you, by the way. Last night, Maitreyabandhu, you talked about the self-surrender and the back of that in terms of I don't have that experience, in terms of I don't have those visionary experiences. And I guess that's very true to me, because self-surrender is my way in, and Shraddha and faith, but actually I don't feel I have these very bright, colourful experiences. So I suppose, it was just refreshing to hear that that's not always the case, because I guess that there's an underlying thing then for me of, or maybe I'm not doing it right, or it's not as it should be.
Yeah, I was slightly struck by a little bit connected to that. You were saying earlier on, Yonavach, that you sometimes do the practice in the presence of the Yidam. And with my particular sort of typology, I think, gosh, that sounds incredibly profound. You know, that you'd, you know, it might be.
But it isn't. It's not.
I'm sure it is. No, actually, I mean, you're a profound man. But, you know, do you see how you can then think, oh, that must mean the whole bells and, you know, the vision, the whole visionary thing, and that you're doing Maitreyabandhu or mindfulness of breathing with this visionary figure floating above you. Presumably, sometimes you just mean something. It's taking the metaphor literally, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have quite low expectations of myself. I think that's why I can get away with saying such things. If you said such things, you probably have this huge expectation.
Well, I'd assume I'd meant something.
Whereas I just mean I bring, I don't know, have a little thought somewhere. I mean, honestly, I have very low expectations of myself generally in life, and I really think it helps in meditation. Because I don't think it's as difficult as we sometimes make out. I don't have huge visionary experiences, but I have confidence that somehow that Manjudosha's present, and most of the time I'm not present to him. But if I think of him, I assume he's there. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's not then a big experience, usually.
I mean, it's like Bhante talking about the myth of the return journey, isn't it? That metaphor. Do you remember that metaphor in that myth of the return journey where he talks about a huge chamber with a one-way glass that looks into a small chamber, and we're in the small chamber, and there's this huge lit chamber. It's that basic taking up that sense, isn't it?
And somehow I think if we do have there's an aspect of faith, isn't there, which is longing faith, abhilasha, which is, I think, to do with, is that the right one? Which is to do with self-confidence. That the Dharma does apply to me, even to me, and that these practices we can do, we are capable of doing, we are effectively going for refuge. Bhante said that, you know, all order members ought to be capable of reaching stream entry if they're sincerely practicing. I think a sort of degree, without a whole sort of hubris and arrogance, a degree of it's not that difficult would help with these lakshanas, because I think, I don't know, when I was ordained, I remember Subhuti coming to the LBC and talking about the lakshanas and saying to us, we should be reflecting on them. And I was really surprised that, my goodness, he was talking to me, little old me. I was newly ordained, and I thought, I can't believe, you know, that I'm qualified to reflect on Anatta. Surely not. And I built up a huge thing in my mind, whereas actually, it doesn't have to be like that. And the results aren't always huge, and but they're effective.
There's something about not expecting the bells and whistles, but kind of recognizing the subtleties that can be going on.
See, I think that expecting visionary experience or something like that, I think looking back, I forced it a lot. You know, I really wanted Padmasambhava to be there, and in my really wanting, I stopped him being there. you know, I just over-egged it quite, because it was so important to me. I wanted to meet Padmasambhava, and I just think that got translated into sort of forcing the image there.
And it's interesting when you talked the other night about those unexpected
Yes.
visions of Padmasambhava, when not just visions in the visual sense,
Yeah.
when
Presences. Yeah.
presences. The ones you talked about were when you didn't expect it,
Yeah,
and when you weren't therefore trying too hard.
Yeah.
In fact, you hardly expected it.
Yeah. With all of those, they were preceded by a light thought.
A light thought.
Not by what I habitually do, which is,
Work.
this is really important. You know, I really believe in this. Let's get it up there. I need to feel something about it. I think I have that habituation very subtly quite a lot of my life, and I think finding a way of unpicking that is as important as anything else.
The other thing, though, that I'd add is that outside of meditation, I found it, particularly on solitary retreats, I found it really helpful outside of meditation to really, really have an intensity of reflection on the lakshanas. It's so easy not to bother doing that, but I can remember, you know, doing lots of walking meditation, going through the skandhas, really looking for, is each of the skandhas me, is the body me, is the feelings me, you know, trying to just do that again and again and again. Outside of meditation, I think Subhuti says this, that if we haven't done the work either through study and reflection outside of meditation, then in meditation it's not likely to suddenly arise. But if we've done an intensity of reflection through study or solitary reflection or whatever, then in meditation all you need is a light touch, a light thought of, oh, not me, not mine, and you know what that means because you've done all the work. So I think study is really important, particularly around anatta, well, all these lakshanas, reflection. Yeah.
Samanka, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said is right, Jnanavacha, but I'm just a bit concerned about the intensity of reflection. And 'cause to me, that can sound a bit like a very intense intellectual kind of forcing it almost, rather than just a very, very calm, relaxed, which implies a lot of shamatha.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in a really, I know this is my own experience, when I'm in a really calm, relatively deep space, as it were, then reflection just kind of comes naturally, you might say, and things just pop up without me kind of going looking for them, if you see what I mean. The more I can just relax into my experience and be with it in a calm way, then I just find things start to appear, shall we say, and I'm in a space where I can appreciate them and engage with them and deal with them and learn from them.
Yeah. It's this, I know what you mean, Mangala, and I think if we, again, it's this weird thing of if it's forced, it doesn't work. But I think what I mean is that it needs to matter to us. I think that the Dharma needs to matter for real breakthroughs to arise. A bit like, I don't know, but not from just a heady way. Like if you know, when we're in love, the lover really matters to us. Well, I think it's that sort of engagement with the Dharma that we need. We need to be in love with reflecting on the nature of reality or our yidam or however, that sort of emotional intensity is what I meant, that it needs to matter. It needs to be important. I think that I know from my own life in London, I don't know, the Dharma sort of matters and then very often it doesn't. And I'm off distracting myself with trivia. It's probably on solitary retreat, but I really get down to, this is really what matters to me. This is what my life is trying to be.
interesting that, because we're going to finish in a minute, but because even that mattering so easily, people can think, oh yes, I need to think it mattering more. I wonder whether that's one of the reasons why Bhante so talks about conditions. Conditions create something mattering, don't they?
Yeah, but I think there's a, of course I don't mean just thinking, but I think the other danger is more dangerous. I mean, more prevalent, that we just don't take it seriously enough.
Yeah.
That actually we don't engage seriously enough with the Dharma. I think that's more danger. I know some people have possibly a danger of overdoing it, but I meet more people who don't. Than that. You know. But do we take it seriously enough? That we're, you know, for example, that even the sort of reflection on death and things like that.
Good. Let's finish there, shall we? And we could have one more because we've not heard from you. So let's. Sorry, I can't quite see your name. Prakshita.
Prakashita.
Sorry.
Yeah, hello.
Prakashita. Sorry, I couldn't quite. My glasses.
Yeah. First of all, thanks very much for all this really good input. It's very subtle and very good. I was just kind of thinking about that language of not me and not mine. I know it's the traditional phrase, not me, not mine, but to me, I think it's been a bit of a pitfall because it kind of implies that there is a me, and but this is not it, and this is not it. And then I get that effect that you were talking about in a previous session, Maitreyabandhu, you know, the kink in the carpet. Okay, so it's not this, and this is not mine, but something else is. Whereas when I kind of formulate it as there is no one whose, you know, body this is, whose, you know, Vedana this is, whose thought this is, etc. It falls into place much more readily.
Yeah, no, I can see why that, how that happens. Yeah. And also the other day you were saying that sometimes you find it more useful to ask questions rather than make statements. So you could, where is the me, or something of that sort might help as well. I think different phrases, or it's so subtle, this, isn't it? And the mind, of course, is so subtle. Our clinging to a sense of me is so subtle that to undermine it, to see through it, might require sort of an experimentation with things. So yeah, that's helpful that you say.
Yeah, that's great.
Sorry.
Carry on.
Even that thing that we always say that there is no fixed self, you know, doesn't really go far enough, does it? What we're really looking for is to see that the self is a mental construct. It's not that there is a self, but it's ever changing. Is it?
Yeah, it's so difficult, again, because you can either tip into eternalism, which is what, you know, most of us have when it comes to a sense of self, or one can go into nihilism and say that I don't exist at all. So even then, the words are so, the truth is so untaught aboutable. So it might be that for some people, if we said no self at all, they tip into nihilism. It's very, very tricky to talk about, but in a sense, you're right that there's no essential self that's separate. At the same time, empirically, there is something going on that is like a patterning.
Well, it exists in the same sense that the bicycle exists, but there is no bicycle apart from the parts and the purpose of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's just finish with a short, just looking at. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your contributions. It's good to have a bit of a dialogue about it sometimes, isn't it? So once again, setting yourself up for meditation. So when you're ready, closing your eyes. We'll just have a short period of just sitting. Okay, good. So let's have a break, and we'll come back together again at 4:30 this afternoon, which is summertime. And it is summertime at the moment. So we'll see you later.